Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Stewart Tansley. I'm Director for Natural User Interfaces in Microsoft Research Connections. Microsoft Research Connections is the host for the Faculty Summit. I am delighted to be hosting today our speaker, Vanka, from Microsoft Corporation. And I'm going to give him the next hour or so. He'll manage the time, but the next hour or so to speak on Metro, Microsoft's new design language, which I hope many of you have heard about and are very curious about. So I will be talking about some of the rationale for that and where we're going with Metro. So without further ado, though, let me just introduce Sarai. Sarai is an esteemed guest for the summit. He's Principal Manager of User Experience, as we call it at Microsoft. He serves as the Chief of Staff of the User Experience Leadership Team and is our overall discipline owner for user experience. He oversees in that role best practices and engineering standards to create high-quality user experiences for our customers. He puts users first rather than the technology, putting users at the center of the development experience for all of our products. He is past a designer at Microsoft and a user experience manager on several products during his 13 years at Microsoft. He's a winner of multiple awards, several of industry recognition awards. Before joining Microsoft, he was a professor. He was a professor of design at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and a fellow at the prestigious center there, the Center for Advanced Study. He's the author of 2 books on design, multiple publications, and has lectured on design in more than 20 countries. He regularly speaks and teaches on interaction design, user experience, product development, and strategic innovation around the world. His work has appeared in ID, Form, Design Council, Wired Magazine, Interactions, the BBC, and even National Public Radio. So you've got a lot to follow there, Sarai. Let's see what you've got to talk about. Thank you very much for coming
Stuart.
today.
Hi, folks. How are you enjoying the event so far? Anyone gone on the cruise yesterday? Yeah, nice day for that, huh? Yeah, you got lucky. We've been having this up and down weather for the past few weeks, but I'm glad that it turned around for yesterday. So my intention in the next hour or so is really 2 things. One is to have a conversation and let you know some of the things that are happening in design at Microsoft. We feel like we're at kind of a important place that we've been working hard to get to for a while, and we feel good to be kind of getting there now. So want to share some of what's happening. I also want to give you kind of a backstory. So not just, it's not going to be mostly your products, it's going to be at what's behind the scenes, right? And so there's going to be a little bit of a journey. And so I think the good news is we've got some time today. So I will speak for about maybe 45, 50 minutes is what I hope, and then there'll be a chance for a conversation. How many folks have, I've spoken at this event before a couple of years ago. I'm wondering if anyone in the audience happened to be there. Stuart. Okay. Great. Okay, great. So I don't have to risk repeating myself because there'll be a couple of common slides. I wanted to make sure I'm using your time well. So what I am going to be speaking about is about Microsoft's new design language, but really more about Microsoft's new design philosophy. Can you see the slides okay? Is lighting fine? And you can hear me fine at the back? Great. Okay. So as I mentioned, there recently, we've been delighted to see a lot of good press, and typically when it used to be that you talk about Microsoft and design, it would be eyes would roll. It's like that is not, we sort of thought of as this successful technology company, such a successful company into the business, and had kind of a hit or miss success when it came to design. But what has been really interesting over the past 6 months, over a year, and it's been accelerating, is we're seeing a lot of press where it's sort of the tone is about the resurgence of Microsoft and reinvention. And it's interesting to see design as and sort of the user experience and the human aspects of the products leading when in much of that press and the conversations that we've been having. So we're starting to see interesting things where, we are, people are really noticing some of our products really are starting to be much more competitive in the design area. And underlying this, there is this tile-based user interface that's caught a lot of attention, which is called Metro. Who's heard of Metro? Great. Most folks know, right? So you're familiar. There, it is this very different-looking user interface. By the way, there will be a version of this deck that is provided after the talk. So don't feel like you need to capture all the images because I will make those available. Okay. What's been interesting, we've had design success in the past, but what is new is really for the first time we feel like we are rowing together. You can think about different companies in terms of offerings, and particularly when it comes to the brand in the marketplace, as either being a house of brands. Think Procter & Gamble, right? You go and buy Tide, or you go buy a different product. You don't really know if Procter & Gamble's behind it. You buy the individual brands. And then there are other companies which are really what we can call branded houses, right? Where it is clear that everything came from that particular company, and if there is a strong brand, you are buying products, not only for the individual products, but because there's the halo of the brand. And usually a user experience that is consistent and ties across different products lets you have that benefit in the marketplace and allows customers that benefit as well. So one of the interesting things for us is we've been having successes in silos, and for the first time we really feel from an experience point of view, we are starting to really row together, and all our products feel like they all came from one mother. So, and behind it is this design language that we call Metro. So a little bit of quiz, it's post-lunch, and let me try and wake people up. So if you're looking at these shapes, and you've raised your hands when I said, are you somewhat familiar with Metro? Some of these shapes would be shapes that you would typically say would be Metro shapes. And I just plugged something out. Not very clever of me. Okay, there it's back. So some of these shapes are sort of typical Metro shapes, and some of them are not. Which ones would you say are typical Metro shapes? Just call them out. Which ones would you say? Top right. Okay, the rectangle on the top right. Top left. That's a square on the top left. Any others? So you're absolutely right. It is those shapes. So what differentiates them is they are very clear, very modern, right? They speak very directly. They don't have a lot of sort of Gothic, decorative kind of aspects to it. An important part of Metro is also typography, right? It's modern typography. And if you look at these, do some stand out as being sort of representative of sort of modern typefaces, which might be Metro typefaces? Just call out the numbers. 3? Absolutely, right, yeah. Any others? 1? Absolutely, you're right. And, in terms of modern typefaces, I usually hear 1, 3, and 5. And actually, in terms of our own look, there is 3 and 5 are a font called Segoe, which is the Metro font, right? Alert, trick question. So here, which ones would you say are Metro typefaces? This is a trick question. I'm going to give you the answer. In fact, it's all of them. So it is about sort of this clean, modern look. And finally, colors. Another important differentiator in Metro. Which ones of these, when you look at, would you say are Metro? Some of them are sort of brighter, more saturated. Some of them are more gray values. Any shout out a number. Not 10. Very good. Very good. Okay. And 6, absolutely. So it is really, again, those clear, direct, fully saturated colors, right? So we talked about shapes, fonts, and colors, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. That is Metro, the user interface and visual language. But that is not the thrust of what I'm going to talk about, right? The reason I bring it out is because that's what Metro is known for. You see a lot of it in the press around this collection of rectangles and colors with numbers in them, right? So Metro is more than a stack of colored tiles. What I'm really interested in talking about is Metro as a design philosophy. And Metro is really our design philosophy. It's a Microsoft design philosophy. And what actually typifies it, we think about it as the modern user experience. Right? And it's modern because it's clean, it's fast, it's in motion, and it recognizes that the world that we live in is a lot about content, and a lot of content is held in typography, so it pays attention to typography and images, and it's also entirely authentic to Microsoft. So over the next few minutes, I hope to tell you why it is actually authentic to Microsoft. And Metro actually unpacks into 5 principles. And here are the 5 principles. We think of the principle of Metro 1 being pride in craftsmanship. And so this is about obsessive attention to details, about being safe, reliable, symmetrical, balanced. We think of Metro as being fast and fluid, playing in the 21st century world where information is moving fast, where we're living in a world of motion and touch. It's highly responsive. And Metro being something authentically digital, dynamic, connected to the cloud, again, about color and motion. And we think about it in a very busy world. It's about doing more with less. And finally, it is about winning as one in many, many different aspects. So these are the 5 principles which I will really take you through for the rest of the talk and tell you how they actually unpack and how we got there. Okay? Good so far? Great. Before we begin, let's do a little bit of time travel. Okay? So 1985, Windows 1.0. This product made by 55 programmers working together for a year, and all of them were programmers, and they sort of got into a room and built it, right? Amazing product, unleashed the power of the microprocessor, right? But if you look at it, this is a product built by programmers for other programmers, right? Very, very sort of rudimentary in terms of who else can use it. The colors, you know, it almost looks like some kind of avant-garde painting or something, right? And then we go forward a couple of years, go to Windows 3.0. And again, there's some technological advancements here. There's 640K of addressable memory for the first time. You can actually move tiles now. That's a huge user enhancement. And then we go to Windows 3.1, and there's some more enhancements to the UI, and we go to Windows 95. The internet is here. This product actually, you know, marks a very important change. It's the first software product that sells 40 million copies, and it actually drives the sales of computers. And we go from there, and as we're seeing that, we're starting to see that there's some more attention being given now to the user interface and the human being who's actually going to be using this as the product starts to get used not just by technologists, but also by other non-technologists. And we move forward, and we come to XP, and at this point we actually see there's a recognition that the market has folks who are more technical and there are folks who are more consumer-like. So there are 2 different SKUs now. Now there's an attempt to actually make it feel like a consumer product, kind of soften it a little bit, you know, start to actually take care of the visual aspects of it. And then we come to Vista, where there is, you know, a lot of investments. Although it didn't fly well as a product, there was a lot of deep investments in terms of the UI. And finally, we come to Windows 7. And it's interesting here because at this point, this is a product that is built not starting from technology, but starting with user scenarios. And it marks a real sea change in the way that we are actually building this one product out of Microsoft, right? And that leads us to where we are now, Windows 8. And Windows 8, you can say, is almost entirely about the experience. This product is the experience, right? Technology is merely a facilitator for the experience. So if you look at it from Windows 1.0, where the product was all entirely technology, to coming to a place where the product is almost entirely about the experience, right? We'll look at what has happened here. What has happened actually is that the value of design has shifted. There was a time when design was a luxury within this company and within the IT industry, where primarily we thought of widget makers building these great technologies. And somewhere there would be probably these small group of talented artists kind of people who knew about colors and knew about what made things look good and sort of understood how to make things make a little easier. And if there was time when the product was being built and at the tail end you had a bit of time, you got them involved. And hopefully they can make the product a little bit shiny before it went out, right? But they weren't really able to get in early in the process to actually have a deep impact. And we moved from there to a place where we really start from design. Before a line of code is written, there is a lot of design work done. And design is not about a surface design. It is really about very, very, very deep user understanding the narratives in people's lives and capturing those into scenarios and then using that actually to build a product before we start coding. So a huge shift which has happened. And this shift, of course, is not just at Microsoft. This shift is happening across IT. And in fact, this is part of a larger shift, and it fits into a model which we can think about as the life cycle of technology products, not just IT products, but any technology products. So if you think about any technology being created, be it operating systems, email servers, or tires, or carburetors, there was some time early in the development of the technology where you just have to get the thing to work, right? And it is what you could say, it's the technology innovation phase, right? And this is all about feasibility, science, efficacy, and so on. And so it is those 55 programmers working in a room building Windows 1.0. And at some point, that ability to build that technology becomes widespread enough that we go into a different stage of innovation. And this is where markets start to expand and think this is Windows 95, and now the concerns actually shift, and the kind of people who are involved in the game actually shift. So now it's about productization, manufacturability, configuration, spreading the market. So the concerns are different. And then there's a certain point when we reach the noon hour where things become a commodity. And once again, the game shifts, and it shifts to what you could call experience innovation, right? And now it is all about the human. Everybody has the capability not only of building the stuff, but also distributing and productizing stuff. So we go to experience innovation, and the edge shifts. And now we are really thinking of behavior, ambience, narrative, theme, style, that entirely different kind of concerns, right? What is interesting in IT, what is happening interesting for us at Microsoft is a lot of the products have reached that point where we're in the experience innovation phase. Right? And you can see, if you look around, think about all the successful companies who are succeeding. They're not winning on technology innovation. They're winning at a mix of product innovation and experience innovation. Right? Just think about the most highly valuable companies. That's where the game is. So, in this business of where between the consumer and the producer, as a producer, you're offering a couple of things. You're offering capability and trust. And in return, you are expecting loyalty back, right? So that's the interchange that we're in, And what has shifted that's important is there was a time when producers were super powerful, had access to capital, technology, channel, marketplace, all that. And we've shifted to a point of a world populated with tiny little apps, where the producer is the consumer is more powerful. And the consumer is no longer just king. The consumer is a dictator. The consumer is a dictator who wants it yesterday, wants it for free, and if you don't give it yesterday and for free, is going to go on a forum and complain about it, right? So this is the new consumer, right? And we are also heading very swiftly towards the place where consumers want their products completely customized for themselves, right? We start to see in the most interesting places happening in hard goods companies, Nike. It costs you as much to go to a store and buy a Nike shoe now, or go to Nike ID and build a shoe for yourself that you have designed, and they ship it to you, right? And it is completely customized to yourself. So, you know, it's of course happening in soft products, happening in Netflix, and it's happening on Facebook, it's happening all, but we're headed towards a place where there's this notion of markets of one, right? So it's kind of a interesting place to be designing. The challenges of designing are very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about challenge designing, and then we'll come to this, from this we'll come to Metro. This is, so if you look at this graph, what's interesting here is this number of menu commands in Word. In Word 1.0, we had 49, and by the time we reached 2003, we'd reached 272 menu commands. So amazing amount of capability added to the product. But the dark side of that is also a huge amount of cognitive complexity, right? So managing capability versus that kind of providing capability without adding complexity is one of the huge challenges of designing, right? We're also, you know, designing at an amazing pace. When I joined the company, we'd put out products every 3 and 4 years, big products. We now put them out every 6 months, right? And we go for products like Bing, we're doing a release every week, right? So it's a huge shift in the pace. And the number of users that we have per product, there are, if it's Windows, if it's Office, these are products with 1 billion users, so enormous scale. And the scale is also extremely heterogeneous, you know, so the number of countries, cultures, languages that ship this is enormous. And when we build something, obviously, being a company that is in the business of building platforms, we are actually building and enabling other companies. And therefore, we have to be super careful when we make any changes, because it has an effect of rippling in the broader ecosystem. And finally, there is this challenge that there are multiple different products with product teams that are working in parallel. And particularly when you think back about rowing together and having a single experience, this is one of the design challenges. These are all of these challenges, of course, of designing, which are internal. I think what is actually more interesting and what is more compelling and what is the bigger challenge is what happens in the lives of consumers. That is the life of an average consumer. They're barely in control of their information. They've got a number of clocks that are blinking 12. They don't know how, they feel out of control, right? And information's coming to them from multiple email accounts, information's coming to them that can barely handle. They don't know if the information's safe. They don't know who is looking at their information. So this is a life of consumer. And it used to be, we used to provide humans a lot of training to handle that kind of information. And this is what we expect the ordinary consumer to really be able to deal with. So there is really an interesting innovation challenge. We've solved technology innovation to a large part. You know, we know how the technology innovation is a known problem, and we know how to solve it, and we optimize it. The bigger innovation challenge really for us is how to master simplicity. Right? And so that is really something that has been a concern on when we are building these very capable, complex products. How do we create something for consumers in this extremely information-filled, time deficit, anxious world where people are constantly feeling overloaded? How can we make sure that we don't add to that, but actually help folks deal with that? You know, let's go back once more, one more quick time travel, right? So 25 plus years ago, when the desktop interface was created, obviously it was a the notion of a desktop borrowing from the real world, which was used to be able to introduce an unfamiliar technology and make that understandable to folks who hadn't experienced computers before. And then as these interfaces evolved, from being those extremely simple line drawing like interfaces, they started to get three-dimensional, think of that Windows 3.0 going up to Vista, and then it started to get have fake materials. It started to look like it was brushed aluminum. It started to have lighting. It started to get transparent. The transparency started to have drop shadows, and it just got more and more hyper-real. And then we get to a point where we get to user interfaces which are like this, which are more real than reality, and now they actually start to mask the power that computers have. They start to get in the way because there's a lot more capability in the digital world than in the physical world, that these actually start to get in the way. So that was actually an important realization for us, that this trend that a lot of the technology industry is following about really showing off fantastic graphic capabilities and making things more and more shiny and hyper-real, it really wasn't solving the big problem that people really had in their lives. And we were doing the same thing when we did our version of Windows Mobile 6.5. We noticed there's a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of shiny stuff there. There's a lot of 3D stuff there, and it's not really serving the needs of the users, and forced us to actually step back and say, we really need to step back, and simplify. The first decision was really, we said, we are going to simplify it around a single chassis. And the single chassis with just these 3 buttons. And then we're going to go look somewhere else to outside sort of the logic of technology and the change in technology and graphic cards to really see how to make an approach to design that's more relevant for the 21st century. And the first place we looked at was Swiss typography. Swiss typography is the sort of gold standard for information design using type, right? Now, a lot of information lives in type, and Swiss type is masterful in the way that it uses grids, it uses systems to be able to organize information. Right? There's a number of concepts that come with it: the use of negative space, white space, the use of weight, and so being able to provide the right kind of visual impact to be able to provide information right, and so on. And interestingly, Swiss typography, which has been around for about 50 years, informs the world outside of information technology. You see it all over, right? It's just in this kind of closed bubble of information technology that the whole trajectory has been something different. So you say, let's look at that. Let's see what we can use from that, because there's also a lot of benefits where it is a system that already scales globally. It works across different languages. And so we decided we need to go learn from this. So we spent time learning from that. The other place we looked at was wayfinding systems. So wayfinding systems being, in unfamiliar spaces, how do people find their way around? How do they get landmark, and how do they be able to get from one place to the other? And a classic piece of design was Massimo Vignelli's design for the subway map of New York. Right? Important point is this bears no one-to-one relationship geographically in terms of exact spaces, but it really provides the information you need to for a very complex data set, right? So we were looking at what are other cases where people need to traverse, and wayfinding systems help them. And transportation is a place that we looked a lot. We're looking at airports, we're looking at metro systems, we're looking at train systems, and we found a lot of clues. And the beauty, of course, of this is we're able to look at some of the ways that problems have been solved before and see, can we bring them into the world of information technology and interfaces here. So not a coincidence that you see some similarities. The beauty again of this is you can have very simple reductive approaches without taking away the richness, right? There's a long tradition of extremely beautiful wayfinding systems. And then we look to the Bauhaus. Who's heard of the Bauhaus? Great, wow, what a design-literate crowd. Okay, so School of Design in the 1920s in Germany, and really the place where modernism was born, right? The whole idea of less is more, right? Omit what's unimportant, so on. So we went and studied the Bauhaus, and try to get those understand what the principles are, and of course, we're not the first. This is the work from the Bauhaus is what has shifted architecture from being sort of over-decorated, overcooked to the sort of the clean, modern look, right? And in the world of IT, we looked at, where can we learn from? And it turns out in consumer products, there are others who have looked at the Bauhaus, most famous Braun company, who have really, that is their brand of their company, is that they have looked at modernism. And they think about each of their products is about, again, omitting the unimportant. We looked at products that are really trying to look for the soul of what really the product is about, right? And so this set of an interesting search on how do we search for the soul of our products. There's an interesting company out of Japan called Muji, which is very, very reductive minimalism. It emphasizes in taking away and all you're left of the product with very minimal packaging, and this avoidance of waste and avoidance of sort of excess decoration creates this beautiful brand. And Muji actually means no brand, right? By using no brand, they've ended up with this very strong brand. So another inspiration point for us. And then finally, we looked at the world in motion. From those 25 years ago when a user interface have been evolving, the world has changed.
Running out of time.
The world we live in
Play hooky, stay home today.
has a lot more motion, right?
Can you grab
Our visions of the future have a world that is very responsive, full of motion.
I got 6 licenses. Where do you want them? Over here, please.
And this is, of course, this is in the movies, but it's not really that far from reality. This is a concept study for Office. And we see those ideas filter down actually into the products that we build, right? So these are some of the influences that we were looking at. And then finally, we looked at our own design history. In the course of all of these years, we have a design history. Going back, look at back in Encarta 1995, there was a UI, and one of my colleagues looked at it and said, what's really important in this UI? This is the information about this Native American chief. And it's not about all the 3D shadows and so on. And he created a concept of really simplifying this. And so this goes way back. We looked at, there's a thread within the work that is being done in the company, which has always got to push towards reducing whatever is not essential, and just finding ways to omit everything that's not important. And that work actually led, interesting, yes?
Can I ask a question about this particular slide?
Sure.
Can you put that back?
Yeah.
So the thing on the top is where the eyes go.
Pardon me?
The thing at the top is where the eyes goes first, and that looks most unimportant when I'm consuming the information.
That looks most important on the first?
I'm saying that it looks least important, all these menu contents, all those things.
Correct.
And they're sitting at the top. So why is that a good design principle? Even in this one.
I am, so to tell you, this is, the purpose of this is to show you the roots, which are now, 17 years ago or something like that, or whatever, 12 years, whatever. Right?
All the designs, all the things
Right.
And they are not, which is needed for consuming the content.
And this is a great question. In fact, if you look at where we are going in metro, that's not the case, right? So this is this is more a history lesson here, right? This is not about the present. But thank you for that question, because in fact, you're kind of edging towards why are they tiles, right? Okay, great. So one of the places that when we looked at our own design history, there was an important skew of Windows, which is Windows Media Center. And Windows Media Center is different from Windows 8. Typically, who's used Windows Media Center? Anyone here? Great, some folks, right? So it is a version of Windows which is a DVR, a digital video recorder, right? And you watch TV on it. So it's not primarily productivity. It is about consumption of information. So when we are looking at this product, recognize, the interface design of this needs to come from a completely different place. One is about the 6-foot experience where you're using a remote, and you need a different targeting model. And you also have to be able to show information in a very lively way, and content is king. So we approach this information in a different way, actually. And so here, if you can see, there's some roots of where Metro comes from. So this is Windows Media Center. The whole idea of content is king and building for entertainment and consumption. And instead of making ourselves or our functionality that we build, our features a hero, the content becomes a hero. I think I have a video here. So here is a motion study. Again, going back to history, this motion study is more than 10 years old. Yeah. And you can see that it actually has some similarities if you played with Windows 8 or use the Windows Phone. You can kind of see the roots there. As we went in terms of our progression, the work from Windows Media Center led to the work on the Zune music player, which evolved again into the Zune HD, and which led to the Windows Phone work. So again, the places that we looked at, we were looking at Swiss graphics, we were looking at wayfinding systems, we were looking at motion, and we were looking at our own design history. And this is where really we see that we come to our own kind of approach to design, which is about reduction. It's about getting rid of Chrome, getting rid of anything excess, about really leading with content. And the new thing that starts to happen is motion starts to become very important at this point. So here is another motion study. So from work, that also started to be a shift for us from working actually in screens and working on sort of printouts. The shift happened now to actually working in these little prototypes and motion studies. And so all of our teams started to learn about motion. And you can see that work actually starts to influence how products are being built in Metro. So that particular animation is called turnstile. And the notion is it's a big change. It is taking from one place to another, right? You're clicking on the tile, and it actually takes you to another part of the UI. On the other hand, there is motion, which is much more subtle, right? It is about you clicked on an email, and you need to retain the fact that it is that email, but get more information. Right? So what's important in the evolution of a design language is a shift to actually thinking about a world in motion, and starting before writing code, building a lot of motion prototypes starts to become really important for us. And then we come to a point where actually, which happened sometime last year, when all of the products actually started to come together, and we started to get press and analysts and folks started to notice that there was actually a experience strategy which now provided a language that went across all of the products rather than these approaches and languages that were limited to within products. So there was within, when we were doing this, we built these set of principles, right, about what we believed in, about being clean, light, open, fast, right? The typography is important, and typography was a first-class citizen, that it was being about alive, bringing that sense of life to what we're doing, and that we wanted to get rid of Chrome. So instead of building the extra shiny stuff, to actually take that all away and let content be hero and really look at what is authentically digital. The challenge, of course, in a large company is that there's a governance problem, right? When you're building so many products, right? We're shipping 4 products a week. To be able, and we tend to be culturally as a company, we tend to really value autonomy. So people get a lot of autonomy, right? So they're folks who have just come out of school, out of design school, and they're working on something, and they want to leave their mark, and they want to go in their own direction. So there's things pulling in different directions. So we've had to be really careful about how we have governance, that we keep that single experience. We have a body, actually, which we have a leadership team, and a part of the goal is they provide the governance to make sure we all snap to the same principles. And so those are the principles that I showed you at the beginning. Now I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into each of those principles so I can unpack what they mean. So folks who walked in later, I started the talk with showing 5 principles, and now I'm going to unpack each of those principles really briefly, and then we can open up to a conversation. So the first principle, pride in craftsmanship. I want to share what that means in terms of font, right? This is a packaging for Windows XP and uses a font which is our print font, which is used on the packages, we use in advertising, which is called Franklin Gothic. It's a nice font, right? It still is something that is appreciated and so on, but it is different from the kind of font that were utilized in the UI. And within the UI itself, there are multiple different fonts, right? And this introduces a lot of problems in terms of brand, in terms of legibility, and in terms of being able to build a family. So we set ourselves a goal. And our goal was to build, and all software products do this. They have a different font for print and a different font that renders on the screen. So we set ourselves a goal to create the first font that actually scales across print and screen, right? And will scale up and down to a number of different sizes and would be able to render well. It's called hinting, which can hint, that we could hint for very small sizes, and that can have an expressively human voice. And this, the font that we've come up with is Sigo, and this is the font that's used both across brand and across UI. You can see there sort of very subtle differences between brand and UI. If you look at the eyes, when you scale eyes down for UI, you can't tell the difference between the L and an I. So it's got little differences where we've got serifs for that. And so the Q, for example, when you scale it really tiny down, and on a phone, it looks like a little balloon on a stick. So we have to change it and do it. So there are little shifts, but for most part, it is one single font. And we have different variants which work for different contexts. For Windows Phone, we have a special set of fonts which are particularly designed to be able to render on phones well. Phones, numbers are really important. So things are scaled down to really small numbers. Interesting little anecdote, the R bug, as it's called, the registration mark. If we are living in a world with a lot of apps, there's going to be a lot of those signs. So we work on little details like how do you scale it down so you're not completely overwhelmed by that. And when we get to Windows 8, we again have sort of a variation of Sigo, which again very finely tuned for tablets and surfaces. There's a bunch of different variations there. Interestingly, now that we've got this family, we can now go for some sort of languages of, like Cherokee, less than 100,000 speakers. So we made this font, and we took it to the Cherokee elders. At first, they thought, they didn't like it. And then we started scaling it down onto phones, and they loved it because they saw the Cherokee language actually being able to scale down to very small sizes. Right? And what's the interesting thing on being very deliberate and very craftsman-like about this thing of fonts? We have a team that we've built which is focused on fonts and building the world's first font that scales elegantly across media, up and down. And what is happening is, if we look at some of the classic ways that people are doing layouts and fonts, typically Adobe is the leader there, right? Adobe InDesign is like the gold standard product. But we're finding that these fonts, they've reached such sophistication that we are having to hack some of those products even to be able to show the beauty of this. So they actually end up rendering better in HTML5 and CSS now than in our traditional graphic software. Here is another example of what we think about as pride and craftsmanship. This is Visual Studio, the last version, and there's a lot of information there, right? And our focus has been really to look at the priorities. What is the most salient information? And let anything that is not really information recede to the background. So it's just essentially, if you go back, right? It's again a reduction. So if we go down to the details, there's a lot of detail building these what were previously all raster icons to be able to build them in vector form, so they're able to scale up and down and have a language where your attention is focused on what you really need to be focused on. So when we think of pride and craftsmanship, those are examples of really going down to those details and paying attention to those details and having that consistency across the company, all of our properties. Think about being fast and fluid, another principle of Metro, right? Delighting with motion, designing for touch. So we actually have teams which we call design development teams. One of the challenges when there are designers who are designing things and there are developers who are building stuff is the handoff. Because one set of folks have gone and spent 5 years at a design school and understand like a hairline, they can see these things which are very, very fine, and they're trying to build that. But then when somebody else has come out of a computer science program, they are trained differently. They don't actually see those. So we actually have built, and this is a problem across the industry, so we built teams that actually, what we call design development teams, that actually work in between software developers and designers and understand both sides of it, right? And allow design thinking to really be a driver. A classic problem in a lot of UI where you consume information is going from page to page, right? And that you get these abrupt breaks. And so in this case, what you're seeing is really a different paradigm where there is going from state to state. Everything's one big page. But to actually build that, you need somebody who understands both worlds, right? And so this is what a design development team actually builds, some lightweight code, to show that. And this is from Xbox. And some of the principles there is technology guiding design, technology informing design, but not guiding it. And that design really becomes something that pushes our technology innovation, rather than technology innovations somehow being made shiny by design, right? And making sure as we invest more in design and in those directions, technology always supports that. And underlying it is this notion that everything matters. We're obsessive about our attention to details in fit and finish, in making things that are not just functional, but gorgeous, And we talk a lot about gorgeousness. Yeah? And this is new in our development vocabulary. This is not something that in engineering development teams will sit around and talk about, is it gorgeous, not gorgeous? But we do talk about that now. Talking about authentically digital, Bing is our search engine, and if you look at the sort of growth of search engines, there's been a lot about information. A lot of them have been minimal because there's a certain time that the pipe that you had to squeeze information through was very narrow, and now that pipe's become fatter, right? And there's an opportunity to really think of search engines, what they can be, and how can a search engine be beautiful, right? And so this is Bing. You're already seeing versions of these builds come out. We had a release a couple of weeks ago, right? Where there's a much richer experience when you do a search that you actually see. Something that's more authentic, not to paper, but to the digital medium, right? If you think a lot of search engines, they essentially taken what is page layout from paper and it's been translated onto a screen. When we think of Bing, we don't think of it as a search engine, we think of it as a decision engine. You're trying to actually complete a decision. So how can the information be presented in a way that helps you complete a decision rather than just see a list of results? Right? So that is what we think about in terms of experience, something that's authentically digital. We talk about doing more with less. I'll give you one quick case study on that. This is about what you call Metro Voice. When we go to customers and ask them, what do you think of the current voice of Windows? If Windows was a human being, tell us what you think of Windows. And the things we've heard are not very flattering. It's mechanical, robotic. It's that monotonous professor who's really smart but puts you to sleep, is always trying to tell you stuff you don't really need to know, and just puts you to sleep. Sometimes it's techie, and I don't know what the hell that means that it's telling me. Or, it's that geek dude in the khakis and glass in the Mac commercial, right? And so we think that's not what we want Windows to be. So we go back and ask customers, what do you want Windows to be, right? And the kind of things we hear is more natural. We want Windows to be more like a person, right? Like a human computer, making you feel comfortable, talking to you, recognize you're somebody, right? Doesn't have to have a lot of humor, but it's just more personal. So we take that and we use that filter to define what is the person that is Windows. And here are the attributes we have for Windows 8. Windows 8 needs to be human, encouraging, vibrant, and straightforward. And these are the qualities that drive the way we built what we call the voice of Windows 8. So what does that actually mean? So here is the old UI of, this is in Windows 7, when you type a Windows product key. So you come across this once, but boy, you're trying to go through that and there's a bunch of letters. It's not, it may not be horrible, but it's not really a most pleasant place to be in. So we went and tested another approach. Say, can we be more personal? Say something like, warm up your fingers. The good news is you're going to have to do this only once, right? This is where you find it. And this was fine, but customers thought, this is fine, but you don't really need you to be that personal or that overly clever. So we went back with a different version, and this is something that customers like. They just want you, as Windows, want you to just be direct. Good news is you need to do it once, right? This is where you'll find it. And this is the version that'll ship in Windows 8, right? Another example, this is that dreaded codec message. You want to see a video, and then you get this big message about codecs, right? You're not really sure, what is a codec? Do I really need to read this? I just want to see my video, right? And so this is before, and then we looked at it and said, we really don't need all that information. So you just need to be straight. This is just the new voice of Windows is just straightforward. So here, the shift, there's a big shift here happening, which is moving, if you look at that arc, moving from the logic of technology to the logic of use, right? And this is a cultural shift. And then, of course, the dreaded blue screen. The good news is there will be very few blue screens happening, but if a blue screen happens, that's what you see. You really don't need to know all the rest, right? And it's interesting, even a horrible moment in your experience where your computer's crashed is an opportunity to make a connection with a customer and be empathic about what has happened there. And it actually is getting very good reviews, even the blue screen. And finally, I want to talk about winning as one. The journey that we are going through is a journey really about where design was, I think, early Windows. Design was a resource to the organization. The organization was primarily about writing code, right, and building technologies, and there was this resource. And we shifted to a part where it was one of the peer players, and we are actually moving to a place where when we think of design as being fundamentally core to what we do a lot of investments, so it's not just designers who understand design, We have training programs so a large amount of the company actually understands design fairly deeply, because we think that's how we make the shift, right? And to a place where we, I don't know if large organizations ever get to the point where design is the organization, but we are somewhere here. We've gone past here and we're headed somewhere here, and that's really what's happening, right now in the company. Now, challenge, of course, is like any place, the ratio between people who are sort of trained and understand design and have sort of got a formal education tends to be very, very low. In most of IT companies, the ratio is 1 to 48 of developers to designers. So there's always a scaling problem. How do you shift values from being about technology to really being about human and about being a user? And so we've really had to think a lot about that. And there's a model of which comes from Italian fashion and fast cars of designer, the hero, this visionary, creating these fantastic things, and we've had to really shift our model to where this is a capability, design is a capability that creates team heroes, and how does everybody get that? And so when I go around the company now and talk to people, this is some of the kind of values behind Metro. That is, this is actually quotes from people. So we ask, what do you value? What are you doing in your work? So people are thinking about fierce reduction of elements, simplicity with a purpose, right? Putting people first, optimizing around people rather than about how we build technologies, right? Again, pride in craftsmanship is something we're talking a lot about. Being polished, content being a hero, delight. We talk a lot about delight now. This is new in our vocabulary, right? And talk about how do you make things alive? How do you make those human connections? For a lot of time in user interface, a primary problem is how to solve discoverability, right? In a world full of information, how do you solve for distractions, right? How do you actually make the hard choices so you give up some features if need be to make smooth experiences? Increasing confidence, reducing concepts, being fast and fluid, and there's a commitment we really have towards being clean, light, and open. I'm moving through this quickly just so you get a sense of the language that's there. And really, it's about a shift to a thinking modern, to a world that life is in motion, and make change only when it helps users. And it's about winning as one at multiple levels, getting customers to be able to win as one, where all the products they use, their learning carries over from one to the other. Products built by somebody else works well on Windows, right? For us, it means how do all of our products row together and win as one. So finally, just a recap of the 5 principles, the Baxter and Metro. So we win as one, authentically digital, content being king, and so on. So I'll stop there, and we've got a few minutes for discussion.
First, I want to thank you. That's an awesome talk. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.